Now, it is hard to believe, but in February of 2023 alone, Nazi sympathizers marched in Hungary, Bulgaria, Spain, and Germany to pay tribute to World War II-era criminals and events. The fact is, despite many European legal attempts to ban Holocaust denial and hate speech, support for the Nazis continues to exist, and marches like these still go on with impunity. So why isn't anyone cracking down? Well, a new report has just been launched today that takes a deep dive into the phenomenon and its effects on the public. And joining us now is Alina Bricman. She's a director of European Union Affairs at B'nei Brith International from Brussels, which put together this report in collaboration with other experts. So break down the findings of this report. How many annual marches actually take place glorifying Nazism? How widespread is this?
Well, hello, it's good to be with you, and thank you so much for having me and covering this. We looked at 12 annual such marches glorifying Nazism and fascism happening all over Europe, from north to south, east to west. In most cases, we're speaking of marches that literally pay tribute to World War II-era Nazis or their collaborators, which twist and invert victims and perpetrators and are trying really to rewrite history. So what did we see? I'll start with the obvious bit: anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial and distortion, the use of illegal Nazi symbols, of illegal slogans inciting to racial hatred, the sale of Nazi memorabilia. All these things are widespread and omnipresent in these marches. Conspiracy myths, Jews as bankers, as globalists, as puppet masters are omnipresent. The use of the Great Replacement myth, where Jews are seen as being behind waves of migration of African or Muslim so-called invaders. And of course, the Great Replacement theory has become widespread, which goes precisely to show how much these marches contribute to the spread of these toxic ideas. One thing that has been particularly striking is the international networking amongst these far-right groups. So we'll see members of designated terrorist organizations, such as the UK's National Action or the Russian Imperial Movement, are often among the international attendees at these marches. We'll see contingents of German neo-Nazi groups, of Scandinavian Nordic resistance movement, of Serbian, Bulgarian ultranationalist groups, traveling all around Europe to other countries, to Italy, to France, to the UK, to join other fellow Nazi sympathizers in their events. So one particularly quaint example, if I may, is a keynote speaker at the Blue Division March in Spain, who was awarded a scholarship by the German far-right precisely to learn so-called techniques of propaganda and combat. So we're seeing those international links are strengthening, which is quite ironic, given that we're speaking of extreme nationalist movements.
Right. So what kind of impact do these marches have on the public, and are they growing in size? Have these marches gotten bigger in past years?
Well, what these marches end up doing, and their size really tends to vary from year to year, from place to place. There was some expectation that perhaps after COVID, these might die down, but as we see, that's really not the case. What these marches do is they intimidate and they silence targeted communities, be they Jews, be they LGBT folks, refugees, or other vulnerable groups. Every march glorifying Nazism or fascism allowed to take place on Europe's streets contributes to that feeling that authorities are not willing to take sides between the aggressor and the victim. So when police are protecting fascist demonstrators, this sends a message to the Jewish community and others that authorities might not be on their side, but might not be there to prevent an eventual hate crime. It's often the case when Jewish communities do voice concerns about these marches. Their concerns are not necessarily taken seriously, and counter demonstrators are often seen as themselves being the troublemakers.
So why aren't EU member states cracking down on these marches? Many do have the legal framework to do so, I imagine.
They absolutely do. And in fact, we provide a very detailed legal analysis in this report, which is quite unique. Member states, EU member states, do have the tools to act. This is one of our main conclusions. At the very least, they have the tools to police individual instances of illegal behavior happening in these marches. The truth is, the situation is quite complicated. A march can be banned 1 year but allowed to move forward the next year, or it can be banned in a certain location and then it will re-emerge elsewhere. Or a march is banned, police is mobilized, but in order to avoid commotion, the police contingent essentially ends up escorting the demonstrators, and that truly sends a dangerous message. It tells those anti-democratic factions that the streets belong to them.
Right.
So we do acknowledge that these systematic bans are not easy to implement. Restrictions on freedom of expression and assembly are exceptional. They should be exceptional. Nevertheless, these freedoms are not meant to be abused by anti-democratic forces that aim to undermine democracy. So authorities must use these tools.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us, Alina, and breaking this down. Obviously, terrifying to see that this is still taking place on the streets in 2023, and hopefully this report is going to be taken seriously by authorities across the European Union.